This is Agriculture Today, and I'm Shelby Varner with the K-State Radio Network. K-State grain economist Daniel O'Brien kicks off today's show by discussing the changes in the futures and what recent news headlines have impacted the market. Keeping the show rolling is A.J. Tarpoff, K-State Extension beef veterinarian, as he shares stories and spooky things he has encountered or heard about as a veterinarian. Chip Redmond, K-State meteorologist, concludes today's show with his weather update, which highlights our recent wet and cool weather and if we can continue to expect those conditions. That and more is coming up ahead on Agriculture Today. You're tuned in to Agriculture Today, and we start our Friday show with a grain market update from K-State grain economist Daniel O'Brien. Daniel, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you, Shelby.
Daniel, looking at the grain markets, where are futures at?
Well, futures are at so-so levels. We've had in the last week some upward movement in corn futures, hard red winter wheat, and also soybeans. And a lot of that has to do with the, trade negotiations that the U.S. and China are having. Reported good news yesterday that came out, and we have general details that are coming into play that for soybeans for sure, perhaps on grain sorghum, those sketchier reports on that, where China, after buying essentially none of U.S. sorghum or soybeans since the beginning of these trade negotiations, is giving every indication that they've re-entered the market. In fact, prior to the beginning of these negotiations, China had come in and had bought some soybeans as kind of a goodwill gesture, to restart that. So really good news in terms of usage. I would say that couldn't come at a better time for Kansas soybean and grain sorghum producers, as grains have already come out of the field or are coming out of the field. If this news of positive movement amongst all these crops, but for sure in terms of sorghum and soybeans, if that comes to fruition, then it could give us strength in the market, a boost to the upside, and give us some amount higher prices to sell at. And again, so much of the decision-making mode right now is that, I either have harvested this and I've got X days of free storage that I need to make a decision within before they start charging on a daily basis storage costs in commercial facilities. On-farm storage also is a factor, but really you have the likelihood of the beginning of storage costs coming in commercial facilities. And if this news coming into the market can give us a price boost, I think that helps farmers that do want to generate cash to have a better set of options than we were looking at before, where we were just really, really bearish on any export prospects, and prices were drifting lower at that time.
What have been some of the prices then when we look at cash?
Cash prices for corn, we see in the highest price for corn as of yesterday, which would have been Thursday the 30th. We did see cash corn price get back above $4 in some locations, $4.20 in the Garden City area. That's a 10-cent under basis. That's still arguably 30-40 cents weaker than we normally would see for corn historically in Garden City over the last several years. $4.05 in Colby and in the northwest part of the state, Pittsburgh at $4, and $3.91 in essence as the strongest prices in Salina, Topeka, Hutchinson areas. So not bad. We're also tracking new crop bids for next year already. You've got this harvest in. We're already projecting out to where things could be. And we do have the highest bid is about $4.65, also in that Garden City area. That would be for harvest in fall 2026. And really the issue that I'm watching closely would be, again, for both for sorghum and for soybeans, if we see hints in some of these upfront cash bids that we're seeing that basis is narrowed up, that there'd be some demand pull happening in the elevator system because, hey, people are approaching them to try to move sorghum down the way, then we'd be looking for whatever might come there. I do see in the Hutchinson area yesterday's price. We had a high of 366, which is 64 under. It was about that a week ago as well, but 366 in the Hutchinson area is still the leader for us cash wise, and in the sorghum market, highest price yesterday was 341. In the next highest price was 341 in the Salina area, 331 in Topeka, and 325 Garden City, 320 Colby, 315 in Pittsburgh. So again, sorghum's Canada. You've got a situation with these sorghum prices where we are certainly covering the direct costs quite well, but we're not at that price. We take whatever we can get over direct costs production for grain sorghum, then we apply it to machinery and to land and to family living. So at least we're covering direct costs and have something to go forth with to cover other aspects of the cost structure. And we'll see. I think the thing to watch, Shelby, over the next month or so will be the strength with which China would come into the sorghum market, buy a fair amount of that and give us a basis improvement of 10, 20, 30, 40 cents. If they really come strongly in, it could be even more than that. And if that's the case, then people that grew sorghum in Kansas, we've had a good crop this year in many parts of the state. We'd have a lot better opportunity for decent selling prices than we have right now. Soybean side, highest bids in the state. Yesterday, 1032 again in the Hutchinson area, 1024 Pittsburgh, Kansas down southeast, 1017, 1018 in Salina and Topeka. And for wheat, we still aren't seeing prices over $5, but the highest prices we do have, at least at this time, 468 in both Salina and Hutchinson, 473 in Topeka, lesser prices elsewhere in the state. So kind of in the mode of waiting to see, I think, the export movement that's coming in. By the way, the government shutdown is putting us in a situation where we don't have strong information to know whether the strength that we'd had earlier in hard red winter wheat export that was being reported by these on a weekly basis by the USDA prior to the shutdown, whether that's continued or not. I think we've no doubt had some buying, but I'd be really curious to see once we do get that information back, what the pace had continued to be during that time frame, and we shall see. I do want to mention that we're at the mode now, and at the time right now where it's the USDA and USDA National Ag Statistics Service would be going out into the fields about now in regular mode to go out and do their enumerated samples of what their crop test plots are for yields. They'd be sending out surveys to farmers to find out what their expectations are or what they've observed from their harvest numbers are around November 1. Well, gosh, it's almost November 1 and we're not seeing much action. I think we're going to be watchful to see whether we have any type of a USDA crop production report that we could use then to feed into the WASDE report that's scheduled to come out on November the 10th. So it's dicey at best right now that we'll have that report, and really it just pushes things back towards the next set of numbers. It's probably December, that would be the December 9th crop production WASDE report. So we typically don't have much happening during that report. But given the different extraordinary circumstances we're facing this year, the importance of that December report could be really heightened. And if that doesn't happen, if we don't put crop production numbers out in the December report, then all of our chips, I guess, are all of the risk and uncertainty in the market will happen out there sometime about the first 2 weeks of January, and that would put us in the mode of having the potential for a lot of crop volatility if by the time we actually measure what type of corn and soybean crops we've had in the U.S., if we find out that as is kind of under the radar expected, that late season yields probably aren't going to have proven out to be as good as USDA was projecting earlier. Well, we'll just say it's an interesting scenario to consider that we could be having tighter stocks to use than we had by the time we get to January than we had been reporting in September. And the first time we have verification would actually be in January. So like I say, just potential for a lot of volatility in the markets, and people are storing grain that long unpriced then it just puts the onus on that January report to give us some guidance. And I guess we'll just be polite and say we could go any which way in any which direction if that ends up being the case.
Are there any trends or movement you're watching in the market to see what's going to happen as we do look forward?
I really watch the relative strength indices on the grain futures movements. For instance, for Dees corn futures, we had an RSI on a scale of 100 to 0, with 0 being very, very declining prices, bearish markets, 100 being full bore bullish markets. We've had a relative strength indices for Dees corn of about 59, so slightly positive. When you look at wheat, the wheat number during that same time, it's also about 57, 58%. So a positive number in the wheat market. When you look at the charts for both of those, we've been jumping. Well, for corn, we've jumped about 20 or 25 cents over the last bit of time here. So really pretty positive move in the market. Where you really see an optimistic market, strong movement is in soybeans here, where we've had about 77 on a scale of 0 to 177% RSI. So strong bullish markets. In fact, here in the last bit of time, we had a gap. If our people are technical chart watchers, for November soybeans, we've got a gap that's where we jumped higher and in a discontinuous manner on that chart. Closed yesterday again at 1091 and a quarter. Had been trading at about 20, 30 cents or more lower than that just within the last week. So this news of the potential of China re-entering the market in a tangible, significant way and buying soybeans has had a big impact on things. So we're buying the rumor. We'll have to see what the fact is by the time we actually get 1 or 2 weeks down the road.
Daniel, I appreciate you taking the time to join us.
Thanks so much, Shelby. I appreciate it.
That was K-State grain economist Daniel O'Brien. We're cutting to a short break now, but we'll be right back. You're tuned in to Agriculture Today, and we continue our Friday show. And as this Friday is Halloween, I want to have a little bit of fun talking about some spooky and maybe a little bit weird things with K-State Extension beef veterinarian AJ Tarpoff. AJ, thanks for joining us today.
Pleasure to be here. This will be a fun one.
AJ, wanted to talk about some unique interactions you've had when it comes to veterinary medicine. And first off, a few stories when it comes to doing necropsies.
Well, yeah, that's a good one. So anytime you ever get around a group of veterinarians, there's always stories to be told about what we've done and different things that we've seen. But a couple that really pop out, and I think it's fitting for Halloween, is have you ever had that feeling that something or somebody was watching you? Well, I've had a couple of those unique scenarios, one of which I got called out to an operation. I was doing a necropsy, and I had that random feeling that something was watching me, and I looked around, and I didn't see anything. Then it dawned on me I needed to look up, and I looked up, and at the top of this fence that was like 8 feet above me was a giant bald eagle that was just sitting there staring at me very intently, like, what are you doing touching my meal? Yeah, so I figured it needed a little bit of some gifts, so I chucked it a little piece of liver and hoping that it would go after the liver and not try to, jump on top of my back. And when you're that close to a bald eagle, you have a better idea of how big those talons are. So that was the first one that kind of snuck up behind me. That it's like, boy, something's watching me. The other one was a little bit closer to home that I thought I might have had to get into some hand-to-hand combat. So again, I went out to an operation. I was going to do a necropsy on a feedlot steer that had died, and I bent down to start opening the animal up to do a diagnosis because that's honestly the best way to be able to figure out how that animal died or what's going on with the group. I go to open it up with my knife, and I hear this growling, this deep guttural growl. And I'm like, oh, what on earth is that? Like, I didn't know if like a pack of wolves moved in, because this was in Alberta, Canada. And I'm looking around freaking out. Then it dawns on me, next to the necropsy area, there's this hole. And I look over, and no further than 6 or 7 feet away is this 35 to 40 pound badger growling at me as I bent over, my head very close to this animal. And I looked up after the fact that badgers can actually run about 35 miles an hour. I cannot run 35 miles an hour. And I'm glad I didn't have to get into hand-to-hand combat to fight over this carcass with the badger. But the badger and we kind of had a duel. It lasted about a month or so. I finally came out victorious, but yeah, that was a danger in the workplace of having a badger trying to attack you while you're trying to do your job. So those are two that come to mind. I think it's fitting for Halloween that, hey, something's watching you. In veterinary medicine, doing necropsies out in the field, realistically, something could be watching you.
And while we're thinking about necropsies and things dying, are there things like the bubonic plague that actually still exist in animals sometimes?
Yeah. So I think this is a good public service announcement because it's not something that people think about all the time. But in the Western United States, yes, we have prairie dogs, we have little chipmunks and things like that crawl around. They get infested with fleas. There is still a population that is harboring and carrying bubonic plague in the Western United States. So if you're out hiking, if you're in the Western U.S. and you see, a dead chipmunk on the side, don't go and play with it barehanded. Just FYI, there's even been some circumstances that predators, whether that be a mountain lion, something along those lines, have preyed upon some of those smaller rats and things like that, and actually can't succumb to bubonic plague. So something to keep in mind, keep in the back of your head that even though some of these plagues and diseases we thought are long gone, they're still around. There are still fleas transmitting them. There are animals that are succumbing to this. While it's really rare to get exposure for a person, it's always good to understand some of those things are still out there rearing their little ugly head.
Have there been some unique or weird things you found or fellow veterinarians when it comes to doing necropsies?
It is, and not even just necropsies, but just on live animals. I think there's some creepy crawlies that always kind of jumps out, and some people really enjoy them. Those that's ever seen like the pimple popping videos would love this, but a lot of folks, especially my age and younger, have never seen cattle with cattle grubs. So grubs, they're caused by heel fly that lays eggs down on the lower feet of cattle, and those little larvae, once the eggs hatch, they puncture through the hide and then burrow up, and depending on the species, either burrows into the spinal column or the esophagus. And then they sit there and wait. And then once they become an adult, they go back to the skin. They bore a little breathing hole, and they get this big larva that's just a big knot that looks like a huge zit or a little abscess that's right underneath the skin, and they sit there and wiggle around. You can see them moving under the skin. It's disgusting. First time I saw one, I was actually in far south Texas, and there were some animals out of Mexico years ago. And that was the first time I ever saw them. I didn't know what they were. And they're just so uncommon because it's regular practice to deworm animals with ivermectins or macrocytic lactones like ivermectin. So we just don't see it very commonly. Well, down there, in different areas that animals may not have had that exposure of dewormers, guess what? They can still those little grubs can still pop up. You see these big old abscesses, you can kind of almost pop them out. You can open up that little hole and pull those things out. It causes hide damage, still causes losses in the cattle industry, but it's not near as common as what it used to be years ago. So yeah, cattle grubs are one. The other one, it is deer season. So we have a lot of hunters out in the field. They're harvesting, whitetails here in Kansas, and they're harvesting those for to consume at home. Don't be surprised as you're doing your cleaning and dressing of that carcass that you remove the head or the tongue area, and all of a sudden you start seeing some stuff move around. Well, deer, just like some of our small ruminants like goats and sheep, can get nasal bots. So these flies lay their eggs near the nasal cavity, and these little bots that are look like a big grub start pouring out of the nasal cavity after that animal dies. So it freaks people out. Yes, it's disgusting. The animal's perfectly safe to eat. It's no concern there. But yes, Nate, can you imagine nasal bots crawling around in your nasal cavity while you're walking around? I can only imagine the headache that causes. I guess the other wildlife, because trapping season is close by, right? So hunting season, trapping season, vet medicine, it all kind of coincides, I guess, somehow, at least in my mind. But raccoons. So raccoons, believe it or not, they carry a internal parasite, just a regular roundworm called Balis ascaris for raccoons. But that roundworm, if people are exposed to it, we're the wrong host. So that roundworm, instead of going into the intestinal tract, migrates to different areas, can actually get into the brain, can put people into a coma, can kill them, or can get into your eye and cause blindness. So I guess for all trappers out there, make sure you wear gloves. So I can think that's one of my take-homes.
And while we're not by the ocean or big bodies of water, you did tell a story beforehand about dogs and the beach.
That's one of my pet peeves as a veterinarian. So I see these dog-friendly beach areas or sandy locations so you can take your dog and let them go run off leash. Well, that sounds nice. There is a problem with that. It's called hookworms. So hookworms are a common parasite of dogs and our domestic animals. And hookworms, unfortunately, they can have skin penetration. Okay, so that means if you are walking down the beach, having a wonderful time, dogs are running loose. What do dogs do as they're running loose? They're probably going to defecate somewhere. Well, if they are carrying hookworms, those hookworm eggs can hatch into a larva, and the larva can actually burrow through your skin, causing these skin migrans, where you can see that the hookworms burrowing through your skin. And they're really itchy, cause a lot of inflammation. They're pretty gross. So those are skin larval migrans from hookworms. And that's why having dog-friendly beaches, I see that and it kind of makes my skin crawl.
AJ, anything else you'd like to share?
A couple other ones that just, really kind of freak you out. Lice. I know we're getting into winter and, people have seen patchy hair loss in cattle and stuff like that. But if you get out a small little magnifying glass, you can see all these little lice running around on the backsides of animals that are infested. And you can take Scotch tape and stick them and you can pull them out. So I really like to mess with crews, and this is kind of a cruel joke that I play on people. But whenever I diagnose lice, I'll go and just start itching. I'll go barehanded and start itching my head until I get everybody in the group itching because they think they're infested with lice now too. And then I remind them that, hey, lice are species specific, so you have nothing to worry about. But it's still gross to be able to see, visualize on the tape, and then you see them with the magnifying glass, all these little creepy crawlies running around. So I guess the big take home is there's creepy crawlies everywhere. There's dangerous stuff out there, but it's good to be aware and good basic preventative care working with your veterinarian can go a long way in solving a lot of these issues.
AJ, I appreciate you taking the time to join us today.
Thank you.
That was K-State Extension Beef Veterinarian AJ Tarpoff. We're cutting to a short break now, but we'll be right back. You're tuned in to Agriculture Today, and we conclude our Friday show with a weather update from K-State meteorologist Chip Redmond. Chip, thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Chip, we've seen a lot of wet, cold, and windy conditions, and while we're thinking about that moisture, did all of Kansas see some, or how much did they see?
Yeah, I think for the most part, everyone in the state saw some moisture. Obviously, there were losers that did not get as much. That was mainly western Kansas on the Colorado border. They only got about a quarter, but we get further east, that gradient was pretty tight, and we got up to about a little over a half inch there from Norton down to Meade County, and then precipitation totals went up significantly in places. We had as much as 2, almost 3 inches of rain in portions of south central in the southern Flint Hills. We did have one heavy rain shower that kind of stalled over Marion County and Saline County. And we had some localized 5 to 6 inches that resulted in some flooding. But unfortunately, the Mesonet missed that and didn't measure that. So breezy winds at times and fog and drizzle. And it was, some places ran almost 120 hours without temperatures moving out of the 50s. And that's a long stretch. And just goes to show that we had really persistent cloud cover with that Gulf moisture that was streaming north over us. And that kept temperatures warm overnight and then kept them cool during the day and wouldn't allow it to warm up. And so abnormal weather pattern, especially when you think of a time like fall, seeing big contrasts and typically big swings in temperatures as the cold air eventually starts winning out as you get later through fall.
Are we going to see any of that contrast as we look ahead?
Yeah, so we had a couple cold mornings this week. That once the cloud cover cleared out, we had temperatures get down into the mid. I saw even low 20s, and finally had a killing freeze for many areas in the west. Some areas in the central, we saw more frost, and then portions of northeast saw freeze and frost, but southeast still remains pretty much frost free. And as we move through the course of the weekend, we're going to see temperatures each morning be right around that freezing mark or so. Overall, no really big widespread killing freeze for eastern Kansas, I wouldn't expect. But then during the day, they're going to warm up gradually. By early next week, we might even start touching 70s again. And early next week, we're going to see a pretty significant pattern change. Those overnight lows are going to warm up. Probably won't get below 40 for a while, I think, starting early next week. And 70s and 40s for lows are going to carry us likely through maybe mid-November. As we get really dominant high pressure, it's going to start building across portions of the western United States. And that's going to gradually expand eastward. And with that high pressure, we're also going to see really dry conditions as well. No precipitation is expected. Granted, our average precipitation is on a downward trend as we get into November, and we can start to see some opportunities for snow, right? Once we get into November, we're talking winter, but no precipitation is expected through the middle of the month. And it's probably good because with that overcast skies that we had and persistent moisture, we had a lot of mud that surfaced and a lot of folks trying to get in the field to take care of either planting or even harvest still. And it'll give us a chance to dry things out a little bit into the middle of the month.
You mentioned a drier November, and is that something we're going to see through all of winter?
Yeah, as you look to the winter, that is going to be dominated, I think, at least to start. And I think we're starting to see that influence of La Nina. It was officially declared 2 weeks ago now. And you move into December, I think there's going to be a period where that pattern does kind of break down. Pretty similar pattern to what happened last year. We don't expect as much precipitation as last November. That was just ridiculously wet. But as we get in December, I think there'll be an opportunity for another influx of moisture as we start to see some other patterns start to become more impactful going into the winter months. And that'll lead probably for drier conditions by the time we get into the heart of winter. The big story is probably going to end up being temperature. There is some potential for some pretty cold conditions this winter, especially when you look at what's been going on up north with the polar vortex and some of the ice cover and snowpack. That's our source of cold air. So we'll watch that closely as you go into winter and see how it'll influence our temperatures and have an impact on our precipitation. Although, keep in mind, winter is still the driest time of the year.
That was K-State meteorologist Chip Redmond. That's all we have for you today on Agriculture Today, but we'll be back with more for you on Monday.